There is nothing like a good shepherd's pie in winter to fill your heart and soul and stomach. That beautiful meat and vegetable stew with a layer of soft mashed potato on top is just heaven for me. This is a labour of love recipe and takes a bit of time to prepare and cook, but it is so worth it. Here's how I make it. First, we need to start with our vegetable prep. One thing I love about a shepherd's pie is that it has lots of vegetables in it. We have two large onions that I'm chopping and dicing into relatively small pieces, followed by two medium carrots, again diced, and then a few sticks of celery. I also like to add 2 cloves of garlic that have been finely chopped. I'm also adding some mushrooms into this recipe, which isn't traditional in a shepherd's pie, but I like adding it in anyway. Now that we have all the vegetable prep done, we can start making the meat filling. I grab a big pot and put it on the stove to heat up, and after heating up for a couple of minutes, I add 2 to 3 tablespoons of oil, followed by the onions, carrots, and celery mixture. Allow that to cook for about 3 to 4 minutes on medium heat until the onions start to become translucent. Then I add the mushrooms and cook that for a further 2 to 3 minutes until the mushrooms start to wilt. Now comes the meat. I'm actually using chicken mince for this recipe as I don't like eating red meat. A proper shepherd's pie uses lamb mince, while a cottage pie uses beef mince. So I'm really breaking away from tradition here. Rather than renaming it something new, I'm just going to stick to shepherd's pie with chicken. Surely most shepherds have a few chickens, right? That's my theory and I'm sticking to it, so there. So I add the chicken mince to the vegetable mixture and begin to break that up and cook that for a few minutes until I can no longer see any pink pieces of chicken. I then add my chopped garlic and cook that for a minute. I add the garlic at this stage because if I added it at the start of the cooking process, it would burn and have a bitter flavour. Once the garlic has cooked for a minute, I add 1 cup of passata and 1 cup of water, which I have already combined in my jug. I stir that around to combine everything together. Next comes the aromatics. A few bay leaves as well as some Worcestershire sauce, a couple of teaspoons of chicken stock powder, as well as some salt and pepper. Give that all a good mix and then simmer the mixture and allow it to cook for about 30 minutes, stirring occasionally. We want to reduce the sauce and evaporate as much water as possible. We want to end up with a really thick sauce. We don't want the meat mixture to be watery, as the pie will end up a mess later on when we assemble and cook it in the oven. While we wait for the meat to cook, we start preparing the mashed potatoes. Like any mashed potatoes recipe, we begin by peeling our potatoes and chopping them into smaller pieces. I'm using about 1 kilo of potatoes. I know that some people like to leave the potatoes whole and boil the potatoes whole with the skins on. It ensures that the potatoes retain maximum flavour and they are not as watery. And while that is all true, I prefer to peel and chop my potatoes so they cook a bit quicker. I think the flavour is still very good this way. So you're welcome to cook the potatoes whole with the skin on if you prefer. However, you need to allow for a longer cooking time if you do it that way. Once the potatoes are peeled and chopped, I put them into a pot with cold salted water and on the stove to boil. While the potatoes are cooking, I go check on the meat sauce. The water has mostly evaporated, and so I switch it off and leave it to the side until our potatoes are ready. I also take out the bay leaves at this point and give it a quick taste test to see if it requires any seasoning. I felt it needed a little more Worcestershire sauce, so I added another teaspoon in, as well as some salt. You can adjust it to your liking. At the potato farm, I boil the potatoes until they are fork tender and drain them. I grab my masher and start mashing the potatoes until they are nice and smooth and fluffy. I then add half a cup of milk and stir that through. It wasn't enough as the mixture was still quite dry, so I added another half a cup of milk, which was just perfect. Now, normally most people add butter to their mashed potatoes, but I'm going to add oil instead. I use half a cup of oil. I use a mixture of olive oil and vegetable oil. If you just use olive oil, it will overpower the flavour of the dish. Stir that through until well combined. Then I add some salt and white pepper and mix that through also. Now that the mash is finished, we are ready to assemble our shepherd's pie. At this point, I go and switch the oven on to 180 degrees Celsius, which is about 350 degrees Fahrenheit, to start preheating. I also grab my baking dish and spray it with some oil spray. I grab the meat mixture and start spooning that into the baking dish until it's all added in. One thing I forgot to add to the meat mixture is peas. I normally add it towards the end of the meat cooking time, but I totally forgot. So just add half a cup of frozen peas into the meat mixture in the last few minutes of cooking. Then I start spooning in the mashed potatoes on top of that and smooth it out. I finish the dish by grabbing a fork and running the fork on top of the mashed potatoes to give it those lines that we normally associate with the traditional shepherd's pie finish. Then lastly, brush the top with some oil, or you can use melted butter if you like, to help give it a nice golden brown colour when it cooks. And we are done with the preparation. I put the completed shepherd's pie in the oven to cook for about an hour or so. I suggest you monitor the pie and check on it at 50 minutes to see how it's going and judge for yourself if it needs any more time. After an hour in the oven, I take it out and allow it to cool for about 10 minutes before serving. Now it's ready to eat. As you can see, it has a beautiful golden brown colour. The top of the pie has developed a nice crust, while underneath you have a delectable creamy mash followed by a layer of chicken and vegetables in a delicious red sauce. I scoop it out onto a plate to serve it. You can be fancy and lift it out with a spatula, but I find scooping it out like this to be a bit more rustic and satisfying for some reason. There you have it, shepherd's pie, a wonderful winter meal that's great for the whole family. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like and consider giving me a follow if you haven't already done so. Feel free to leave a comment to let me know what you think of this recipe, or if you have already tried it, tell me how it went. Also, please check out my other cooking videos for further recipe ideas. Until my next video, take care everyone.